I have spent my life governing the behavior of seconds. As a horologist, a restorer of antique timepieces, I live in a world defined by the microscopic interaction of brass and steel. I understand that time is not a fluid concept. It is a mechanical one. It is friction, tension, and release. If a gear is misaligned by a fraction of a millimeter, the entire system loses accuracy. A minute becomes 15 seconds. An hour becomes a lie. I believed my marriage to Lydia was like a chronometer certified, tested, and immune to the variations of temperature and position. Lydia was a history professor, a woman who dealt in centuries while I dealt in milliseconds. We were a couple built on the appreciation of the past. Our home was quiet, filled with the rhythmic heartbeat of the grandfather clocks I restored in my workshop. I loved the cadence of our life. I loved the way she poured tea at exactly 7 a.m., the way our routines interlocked like the teeth of a pinion gear. I thought we were synchronized. I didn't realize that while I was obsessing over the accuracy of the escapement, the mainspring of our marriage had already snapped. The slippage began in the spring. It wasn't a sudden stop. It was a loss of amplitude. Lydia began to drift. She would arrive home 20 minutes later than usual, attributing the delay to department meetings or traffic. Her stories, once detailed and historical, became vague summaries. The rhythm of her affection changed. The way she touched my shoulder felt perfunctory, a habitual gesture rather than an intentional one. I noticed these things not with the heart of a husband, but with the eye of a watchmaker noticing a balance wheel that was wobbling on its axis. The discovery came to me in the form of a favor. It was a humid Tuesday afternoon when Lydia came into my workshop, the air heavy with the smell of clock oil and old dust. She held a small velvet pouch in her hand. She seemed nervous, her fingers toying with the drawstring. She told me that a colleague of hers, a young associate professor named Simon, had dropped his grandfather's vintage wristwatch and it had stopped ticking. She asked if I could look at it. She stressed that it was urgent, that Simon was distraught over the heirloom. I took the pouch. I felt the weight of the steel inside. I agreed to help, driven by professional pride and a desire to please her. She left the room quickly, claiming she had grading to finish, but I noticed her hesitation at the door, a backward glance that spoke of anxiety. I sat at my bench and adjusted my loop. I slid the watch out of the velvet. It was a beautiful mid-century piece, a chronograph with a complex movement. I examined the exterior. It had been cared for, but there were signs of recent trauma: dent on the lug, a scratch on the crystal. It wasn't an heirloom. The wear patterns were wrong. This was a watch bought recently, perhaps vintage, but new to the owner. I used my case knife to pop open the back. The seal broke with a satisfying snap. I laid the case back on the rubber mat and leaned in to inspect the movement. The balance staff was indeed broken, a clean fracture from a hard impact. It was a straightforward fix. But then, the light from my articulated lamp caught the inside of the case back, the surface that is hidden against the wearer's wrist. The surface that is invisible to the world unless you have the tools to expose it. There was an engraving. It was fresh. The metal shavings hadn't even been fully cleaned from the grooves. I adjusted the magnification of my loop, my breath catching in my throat. For Simon, every second counts. Love. I stared at the inscription. The L was stylized, a loop I had seen 1,000 times at the bottom of birthday cards and grocery lists. It was Lydia's hand. The world inside my workshop went silent. The ticking of the 50 clocks on the walls seemed to stop all at once. I looked at the watch, the broken machine that belonged to her lover. She hadn't brought me a colleague's heirloom. She had brought me a gift she had bought for another man, a gift she had personalized with a declaration of their shared time, asking me, her husband, to fix it so she could give it back to him. The cruelty of the request was breathless in its efficiency. She was using my skill, the very thing that supported our life, to repair the token of her infidelity. I didn't storm upstairs. I didn't throw the watch against the wall. I possessed the patience of a man who can spend 3 hours straightening a hairspring. I felt a cold, metallic dread settle in my stomach. I realized that the department meetings were Simon. The traffic was Simon. The drifting rhythm of our marriage was because she was keeping time with Someone else. I proceeded to fix the watch. It took me 4 hours. I replaced the balance staff. I oiled the jewels. I regulated the timing until it was running within 2 seconds a day. I polished the crystal. I cleaned the engraving, removing the microscopic burrs of metals so that the message of betrayal would be perfectly legible. I worked with a steady hand, channeling my rage into a terrifying precision. I wanted the watch to be perfect. I wanted there to be no excuse for it not to work, just as there was no excuse for what she had done. The confrontation happened at dinner. Lydia was eating salad, avoiding my eyes. I placed the velvet pouch on the table between us. It made a soft thud. I told her the watch was ready. She looked up, relief washing over her face, a smile forming that didn't reach her eyes. She reached for the pouch, thanking me profusely, praising my talent. She told me Simon would be so grateful. I didn't let her open it. I placed my hand over hers, stopping her movement. I told her that I had to replace the balance staff. I told her that while I was inside, I had taken the liberty of cleaning the case back, specifically the inscription. I felt her hand go rigid under mine. The blood drained from her face, leaving her pale and translucent in the dining room light. She didn't pull away. She froze, like a mechanism that had rusted shut. I described the engraving to her from memory, reciting the words "every second counts" with a flat, emotionless delivery. I asked her how long she had been buying time with him. I asked her if the seconds she spent with him were the ones she had stolen from me. She collapsed. It wasn't a physical faint, but an emotional implosion. She began to cry, the ugly, jagged sobbing of someone who has been stripped of their secrets. She tried to explain. She told me that Simon made her feel young again. She told me that our life had become static, too much like the clocks I restored, beautiful but repetitive. She claimed that the watch was a goodbye gift, that she was trying to end it, that the accident with the watch was a sign she couldn't ignore. I listened to her dissonance. I listened to the grinding gears of her justification. I realized that she viewed our stability as stagnation. She viewed my devotion as a cage. The emotional impact was a slow, unwinding tension. In the days that followed, I couldn't enter my workshop. The sound of ticking, which had always been my lullaby, became a torture. It sounded like a countdown. I looked at the tools on my bench and saw only the instruments of my own humiliation. I had fixed the watch. I had enabled the affair even in its discovery. I felt like a fool, a man who understood the mechanics of a machine, but failed to understand the mechanics of the human heart. Lydia tried to rewind the hands. She pleaded. She apologized. She told me she would cut Simon out of her life, that she would transfer to a different university, that we could reset the time, but I knew something she didn't. I knew that in horology, once a spring is stretched beyond its elastic limit, it can never return to its original shape. It is permanently deformed. You cannot bend it back. You have to replace it. I decided to leave on a Sunday. The house was quiet. I packed a single suitcase. I didn't take any of the clocks. I left them all there, ticking away, measuring the silence of the empty rooms. I told Lydia that I was leaving. I spoke calmly, with the same precision I used to explain a repair to a client. I told her that trust is like a mainspring. Once it breaks, the watch stops, and I had no intention of manufacturing a replacement part for a machine that was fundamentally flawed. I walked out of the house and into the bright, unmeasured light of the afternoon. It has been a year since I fixed Simon's watch. I opened a small shop in a different city. I work alone. I still restore timepieces, but I no longer take work home. I have learned that time is precious, not because it can be measured, but because it cannot be refunded. I often wonder if Simon wears the watch. I wonder if he looks at the smooth sweep of the second hand and thinks of the man who calibrated it. I wonder if Lydia knows that every time that watch ticks, it is the sound of my work, keeping her betrayal alive. To anyone holding a broken piece of their life, wondering if they should try to fix it, wondering if they can polish out the scratches, look closely at the damage, use the loop. Sometimes, the flaw isn't on the surface. Sometimes, the inscription is on the inside, and no amount of polishing will ever make it disappear. Do not waste your skill repairing a mechanism that was designed to hurt you. Put down the tools and walk away.